I was visiting a friend of mine in Warminster Hospital 10 years ago, March the 18th of '97, Ed Calhoun, and he was having some problems with diabetes. And Eddie looked at the clock and he said to me, "It's 5 o'clock, you have to go." And most of my friends realized that from 5 to 7, I would spend a couple hours with my brother. I would feed him. I would exercise his arms and legs. We talked about politics. We talked about current events. We talked about problems. So I drove home and I parked on the street and I sensed that something was wrong. And I didn't know what it was. It was an extremely eerie feeling for me. And I noticed that his van wasn't in the driveway, and it was always in the driveway at 5 p.m. It was just a very uncomfortable feeling. And I walked into his room and he wasn't there. And I didn't understand that. So there was a little green box that the family would keep on one of his bookshelves, and we kept money in there. That was the paperboy money, that was the ice cream money. And he always asked me on a daily basis to count it so we could have an idea how much money he had. And I opened it up and it was empty. And that same feeling I experienced again. And I didn't understand it. And my sister asked me to come upstairs. This was Linda. And I went upstairs and she looked at me and she said to me, "Your brother's not coming home." And I was angry and I said, "What are you talking about? My brother lives here." And she looked at me and she had some tears in her eyes and she said, "Listen to my words, your brother's not coming home." And it was that time that I was able to deduce what she said, and that I assumed my brother was going to commit suicide. This was a double tragedy for me because I not only lost my brother, I lost my best friend. Obviously, most people knew that Kevorkian was involved, and I can tell you why. It's my understanding that there was a note that was attached to my brother's chest when he was found, I believe, by a chambermaid, if I remember correctly, and the note said, "Contact Jeffrey Fieger." At that time, Jeffrey Fieger was the attorney for Dr. Kevorkian. So most people realized there was a connection between the two, and in all probability, Dr. Kevorkian assisted in my brother's suicide, which we all know now is actually what happened. And a lot of people have asked me now, are you angry at your brother because your brother assisted Buddy in going to Detroit? And the answer is no. My brother Jimmy was just incredibly strong, emotionally strong to do something like that. And I can tell you right now, there's no way that I would have been strong enough to do something like that. I just couldn't do that at all. I guess I'm just weak emotionally, maybe spiritually, when it comes to something like that. But I do know that Buddy was neurologically sound, and Buddy was very resourceful, and he didn't want to live in a state of pain any longer. He knew that medical science could do nothing for him to regenerate nerve growth. Probably sometime in December of '96 or maybe January of '97, we had a discussion about suicide. Now, I didn't realize then, I just didn't perceive that he was actually talking about his own suicide. He wanted to know how I felt about it, and at that year of time, I was opposed to it. Obviously, my philosophies have changed for people that are suffering from a terminal disease or people that are disabled to the point where there's no chance for the recovery. I didn't feel that way in '96, the early part of '97, and I had told him specifically that I wouldn't support anybody, I didn't say Buddy, anybody that would be intent upon committing suicide. And maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, he started giving me some of his baseball memorabilia. He had a collection of baseballs and also some football memorabilia as well. And obviously from what we've all read, when an individual begins to give away some of their prized possessions, that's indicative that an individual is thinking about suicide. When he got hurt on September 29th of 1973, and I was at that game against Plymouth Whitemarsh, at Plymouth Whitemarsh, and I was sitting with a friend of mine, Bobby Kennedy, and when he was tackled, he didn't move. And I remember saying to Bobby Kennedy, "Good grief, he's not moving at all." And Bobby didn't say anything, just looked at me, didn't say anything. And after about 4 or 5 minutes, and it may have been 2 or 3 minutes, but it seemed longer than what it was, I decided to go out on the field. And I walked on the field, and he wasn't moving at all. And I didn't want to accept the fact that he was paralyzed at that point in time, but I knew something was wrong. He kept asking me, am I paralyzed? Am I paralyzed? He repeated that to me. And I kept responding by saying I didn't know. I had no idea if he was or not. And I remember he asked me if I would give him some water. He was incredibly thirsty, and there was a sponge, and I sponged some water in it, and that's how I was able to quench his thirst. And so it took maybe a month, maybe 2 months to build the addition on my family's house. All right, but it was just terrific to see all these construction guys and the plumbers, people in those trades, and that donated their time to build this particular room so Buddy's life would be a lot more comfortable. You can try to imagine what life would be like living in a hospital room at the age of 17, knowing you're going to be there until you die, as opposed to living at home, being with your family. A family can put you in a wheelchair, a family can put you in the porch, a family can put you in a van with a lift on it and take you to the mall. I've suggested to people that they lie in bed at nighttime. Get ready for bed, lie in bed, lie on your back for half an hour and don't move. Don't move. So if there's an itch, don't scratch it. If there's a spider walking up your arm, you just have to watch it walk up your arm. If you have to use the facilities, you don't use the facilities. Now multiply that by 23.5 years, and that's the kind of life that he had to live. And he did it with minimal complaining, to be perfectly honest. And he and I were very close. He very rarely complained about anything. I don't ever remember him saying, why me? Why couldn't it be somebody else? I was only 17 at the time. My whole life was ahead of me. Why was I struck down at 17? I just don't ever remember him. And his resilience to me was just indescribable. We go on the side of my parents' yard and we just throw this football. He would run patterns and I'd throw the football. He'd get tired, I'd run patterns and he'd throw the football. And we did that for hours and hours and hours. At 6, 7 o'clock at night, it was time to go in, and we were disappointed because we couldn't throw it. And that's one of my favorite memories of my brother. And if he were alive today, I would go with him somewhere and buy an orange football, but it had to have 2 black stripes, and we'd throw the ball. And obviously, I would like to think he'd have kids, and I'd throw the ball with his kids and just talk about some of the good times, recount the good times that their father and I, had. The families decided that we're going to go to Mass at St. Joe's Church in Warrington. All right, that's at 11 o'clock. And we'll convene at my parents' and go as a group. And then afterwards, we'll go back to my sister Linda's house and have spaghetti or whatever it is. And it'll be a family affair. And it'll give us a chance to tell some of the old stories about Buddy.